You don't need another strategy. Here's what you actually need to figure out why you can't implement the things that you already know. I'm Dr. Brooklyn Storme, former psychologist, now business coach, and I help women just like us to build profitable private practices, usually in under 12 months. Being neurodivergent means I see the patterns that other coaches miss, but it also means I'm a truth teller, so I'm not interested in giving you any business advice that sounds good or might be trending, but doesn't actually work for us. Welcome to the Practice Momentum podcast, where we're going to get your private practice sorted out. Thanks so much for being here, and let's get on with the next episode. Google added mental health crisis tools to its AI platform called Gemini just last week, and it's going to change how we run our private practice potentially. It's also going to, I would imagine, have a big impact on clients, and I would imagine, if they're going and using these tools, hopefully these tools are going to be helpful. I guess maybe it's too early to tell yet, but it could impact, the landscape of the clients that we work with. I mean, what's it going to mean for us if clients are using mental health crisis AI, interactive tools and things like that? What could it mean for your practice? What does it mean potentially for clients? All those kinds of things. Welcome back to the podcast. This is what we're talking about today. So before you think, oh no, here she goes, she's talking about AI again, what happened to the actual podcast? This is the actual podcast. We have to keep up to date with what's going on here. And this, I think, is something super important. Now, the idea of digital supports for mental health is not new, right? For years, we've had, big platforms offering e-health, digital health, telehealth, text-based health, chat-based health, all those kinds of things. So it's not like it's new. I guess for me, the new aspect is that it's AI. And, that's, I think, interesting because unlike, I guess, some of those more traditional ways, there are going to be implications around somebody using AI for mental health crisis support, okay? So look, this is totally brand new. It's been included to support people who might be experiencing, some kind of really serious situation when it comes to their mental health, right? The reason that this has also, I guess, landed for me is something that's absolutely worth an episode on this show is because for us as healthcare professionals, right, frontline workers, many of us, it really crosses over into our professional territory now. Right? So when Google adds a mental health layer to one of the most widely used AI tools in the world, I mean, it has committed $30 million to this. I mean, that's big, right? It's a signal that perhaps the line between AI interaction and mental health support is perhaps starting to become blurred in a very public, a very mainstream way. And I think it's our responsibility to be on top of it. I think as professionals, we need to know what that really looks like so that we can have helpful, informed conversations with clients about it, right? Whether that's clients who start using it before they connect with us, whether it's a tool that they want to use during their work with us or even after. So in this episode today, I want to try and, if I can, I'm probably not going to do justice to it because it's so brand new. There's not a whole heap of information out there, but I want to talk with you about exactly what's been added to the Google Gemini AI platform, share with you a little bit about what it does, also what it doesn't and can't do, talk you through how your clients will probably start engaging with it once they become aware that it's available, and what you might want to consider doing differently around your private practice. For example, I'm thinking intake process, but I'm sure there are other aspects as well. I think too, it's important to touch on, what does it mean for client privacy? What does it mean for ethics? I have ethical concerns. It's not so much is this good in theory? We know that digital health has been around for a long time. We know that the government has digital health, there's e-health, we've got online health and all the things. That's not the issue. But this is AI, which is a new frontier. And so I hope that by the end of this short episode, because I've got a client in 20 minutes, you will have enough information to sort of feel a little bit more like on top of it rather than, a bit nervous about it. So, okay, what did they actually add? Let me give you sort of the broken down version. So they've called it a mental health safety layer. And so what it looks like is that if somebody is working with Gemini and the content of that conversation suggests that that person might be experiencing suicidal ideation, some kind of, mental distress, they might be expressing self-harm, that gets detected, or some other kind of mental health crisis, Gemini AI is now trained to recognize that and to respond differently to the user in the moment. So instead of just carrying on the conversation as normal, right, what's going to happen is it will surface a new dedicated health model that's called Help is Available. So that model provides one-touch access to crisis support services that the user can access either by phone, text, chat, or even, the internet, like an online service, right? As I said before, they've committed $30 million over 3 years to supporting, a global crisis hotline or hotlines as part of this. So it's not just that they're adding like a screen on your computer of resources, right? They're actually putting money into infrastructure around those resources that people are going to be able to use and access and maybe even depend upon when it comes to, their experience of a mental health crisis. This has come about in part, not wholly, but this has come about in part because Google was sued because of a user that was using Gemini AI and, that user was in crisis. The lawsuit kind of took off and really accelerated and it was highlighting, I guess, concerns that many people had around vulnerability of clients. So now instead of Google and Gemini just kind of being the wild, wild west in terms of users going and talking about their mental health, Google, Gemini learned from that, I guess, and they decided they were going to take proactive action and, maybe want to be seen as more of a bridge to professional help and not a replacement for it. And that's really, really important because I think, again, just my personal opinion, my 5 cents here, I think sometimes people do go into ChatGPT and expect that ChatGPT is like this some wizard and it's going to fix everything, forgetting that AI gets things wrong, right? Forgetting that AI is programmed to be sycophantic and agree, with the user and affirm everything that the user's telling them, unless that user is savvy enough to know that they can go into the instructions and adjust them and things like that. So this new feature connects users to things like a crisis line, but not to actual clinical care, right? So that's important because, at some point, you probably find you want to have this conversation with a client yourself and you'll need to understand what it is so you can explain it clearly. There are also some guardrails around this support that I think would be very helpful for you to be aware of. So there are some protections that have been specifically designed to prevent the Gemini AI from acting as an emotional companion, which is what I was talking with you about before. ChatGPT and in the past, Gemini would, sit beside you as a friend and go, yeah, you're right. That's really horrible. Yeah, that really sucks. Yeah, you are in the poop, or it would try and, if the user said act as a therapist, it would try and do that, right? So what Google's done now is they have gone in and built mechanisms embedded them in the AI now that will prevent emotional dependence. And I think that is so, so, so important. If you think about all the people you know that use, let's say, ChatGPT, just because it's one of the most common and most people know it, think about how many of us have named our ChatGPT or have, personified it, given it some kind of human details, right? It's like we feel like we're in a relationship with them. Now, I know there are going to be some people that say, oh, I disagree. But there are other people that say, yeah, I call mine Susie, or yeah, mine can be a real, tough nut to crack sometimes. And, we've got these kind of relationships with them, right? So that happens through the relationship building of know, like, and trust, right? Which is what we're getting back to a minute ago around the ChatGPT, for example, being quite sycophantic, affirming you, saying, yes, you're right. That must be really hard for you. Your mum shouldn't have spoken to you like that. Yeah, who does she think she is? All this kind of stuff, right? It's identified that when it's acting as an emotional companion, that leads to trouble. And so, yeah, they've put mechanisms in place to prevent that dependence and specific protections for younger users, okay? They're not perfect. This is all brand new, but I think it's important to note that these are, intentional, upgrades to the system based on the evolution of AI in the mental health space at the moment. I think that's really super important, and it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds. Hopefully there's some research that will be done on this because it's different, right? There's already bodies of research around the effectiveness of digital health and e-health and online supports and things like that, but there isn't a whole lot of research because there hasn't been time yet for the effectiveness of something like this, right? So yeah, Gemini is not going to be doing clinical assessments with users. It can't diagnose them and tell them, yes, you've got ADD or anything like that. And it's not going to provide any sort of ongoing therapeutic support or therapeutic relationship or anything like that. In fact, as soon as the model detects that there's a need for a professional relationship, it's going to shoot that person off to clinical supports. So it's detecting signals based on what the user is either typing in, or if they're using the voice version, what they're speaking in. And then based on those signals, it's redirecting that user to services. Okay. So at the moment, clients are already using AI for mental health, whether we want to believe it or not. They are, and many of us have shared stories of this, right? And here's what I think is a little bit sort of confronting when we think about this. The reason that Google felt the need to develop these resources at all is because people were already using Gemini AI to have mental health conversations, to get support. They were isolated. They didn't want to talk to their loved ones. They couldn't access, real life support. All of the reasons, right? And then, of course, Google gets sued. So Google weren't told, hey, you need to go and put some parameters in place to make this platform safe. But, they did reflect on, okay, what's happened here? This is probably not a good look. And we've got some kind of responsibility, and let's maybe lead by example. So to my knowledge, it's, the first sort of broader, bigger, well-known AI platform to be able to build this in. I could be wrong, but I feel like this is, they're leading now as far as this goes. Yeah, and people were using it because unlike a therapist, and unlike, digital health or, downloading the PDF and doing the text-based chat during business hours and things like that, the AI is there all the time. It's accessible. It's free to use, right? It's there at 2 a.m. when everything feels really, really hard. And of course, it doesn't judge them, right? And that's very, very seductive for somebody who's experiencing, trauma, mental health crisis, things like that. So, take a moment now to think about the clients that you've seen in the past few months and, have you asked them, are you using AI to support your mental health? Or how many might have even raised it in a conversation? How many of them, before they booked an appointment with you, did spend time using AI, asking questions about anxiety or their relationship or whether or not they had ADHD? How many of them are using AI to perhaps even practice what they want to say to you before they come into a session, right? So if you're saying, I don't know, no idea, I think that's very important because the number is probably higher than you would expect. In fact, research and anecdotal reports both point to the pattern that people are using AI for things like emotional processing now, psychoeducation, checking their symptoms, and sometimes as a surrogate for social connection. And it's not because they don't want to pay you, it's not because they don't see the value of therapy and things like that, but they're doing it because sometimes accessing support is difficult. Maybe there might be financial costs, maybe there could be wait lists in their area, maybe there's still stigma that they're experiencing around reaching out to like a person in real life, right? So the specific concern, I guess, with Gemini's mental health feature is that in a way it's normalizing something that was kind of already happening. And once Google puts a help is available module into the world's most widely used AI assistant, talking to AI about your mental health becomes, I guess, a little bit demystified, a little bit more mainstream. So it means that more of your clients will probably, I would imagine, arrive to your practice having already had some of those conversations. And some of them may have even been directed to you via Gemini, right? Yeah. And some of them might even be thinking they don't need to work with us anymore because they were able to get some support via Gemini. So maybe, when you're working with your clients this week, start thinking about asking them about the use of AI, not with judgment, just be curious. It's nothing to worry about, but what I'm saying is that the landscape that your clients are navigating for themselves before they reach you, while they're working with you, and even post engagement with you has changed. And I think it's your responsibility to stay current with what it looks like and how it translates in real life for your clients. In a practical sense, I think maybe it might be time to review your intake process and also your informed consent. So, I want to give you something practical here because I know some of you are probably wondering what you need to sort of, do I need to overhaul the whole intake process? No, but there is something that you might want to consider adding, and that is a question about AI tool use in your intake form or your initial session. So for those of you using Novo Note, Patient Note, Heidi Health, you've already updated your informed consent around AI use. But this is a little bit of a different question. This is now asking your client, are they actively using any AI tools or apps to access emotional support, mental health information, or for their own well-being? I think this is important because if a client has been having daily conversations with ChatGPT about their depression or, now Gemini about their depression, and they've been doing that for the last couple of months, I think that that's clinically relevant, right? And that's going to impact your case formulation. The content of those conversations might have perhaps reinforced your client's experience, or it might have even contradicted helpful information that you're giving the client. I mean, if you're giving the client tools around CBT or something like that, but the AI already knows the client and knows that the client doesn't work well with this, that, or the other, and that client goes back into the AI and says, oh yeah, my psychologist gave me this thought record and everything, that is going to be like, don't worry about it, mate. Like, we'll find something else for you. And that can be very disruptive for a client's progress, for their well-being, for their treatment, all of those kinds of things. I think it's also very important to, again, just be mindful that the relationship that they've developed with the AI shouldn't be underestimated, because for a lot of people, it's where they can go and be themselves, right? They can be kind of anonymous there. There's no judgment there. It's just AI. And so it can create dependency, and there is research around that, right? And that is very, very important because it feels so real for the client. So if Gemini's flag them as being in crisis at some point too, like if they are using that, and I would say it's probably not going to be long because, ChatGPT follows everybody else, right? The ChatGPT, in my mind, started off as being quite innovative, and now other AI platforms have come out, and now it's like the tables have turned and ChatGPT is catching up. So I would imagine Chat's probably going to introduce something like this, but you want to know about it. Yeah. I think it's also important for you to be aware that you might want to raise this around informed consent, because clients have a right to understand that AI tools are not clinically confidential. Okay. So when your client's talking to Gemini about their thoughts, whether they're suicidal or not, they might be thoughts about anxiety or trauma or their relationship and things like that, letting them know that that conversation is stored by Google as part of the standard data policies, and therefore don't have any clinical privacy legislation supporting them. I think that's very, very important to know. We don't know what Google does with that data. Are they using the client's data to train future models? What if the data gets leaked? Who gets to see it? Who's it getting sold to? I think that's a very, very important thing that you want to be discussing with your client. It's not to take away from the value of them being able to access mental health support during a crisis when you're not available. But I think you do need to, I guess, provide some kind of context for the client so they can be mindful around how they interact and what they share. You don't need to, teach them about AI literacy in any great detail or anything like that. But I think a lot of them probably just don't understand. I think they just, trust that maybe it doesn't even cross their minds about their privacy and confidentiality, but it's very important. And so even just having one sentence in your informed consent doc about the difference between, AI interactions and therapeutic confidentiality would be just some good practice. Okay. So maybe you might write a question that says, do you currently use AI tools for emotional support or to access mental health information? Right? They could just say yes or no. If you wanted to take it further, you could ask them, okay, I noticed that you said yes to this question. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? What tools are you using? And then if you want to, I think it'd be great to just remind them about privacy and confidentiality. It might be helpful to have some kind of brief psychoeducation script ready for those who are using it heavily, right? Not discouraging it, but just to put some context around it. So you might say something along the lines of, oh, that's great. You know what? AI can be so useful for information and for processing, but it doesn't have access to your full history, right? It doesn't understand your full picture, and it doesn't have any clinical training. And so what we do here is different in these specific ways, right? So you're just being really clear about it, not discounting it, not dismissing it, not making them feel bad because they're using it and saying you're better than AI. It's just saying, hey, they do different things. One's not a swap for the other. Yeah, I think it's important because the way that we articulate this with our clients can very easily and quickly veer into either catastrophizing or dismissing and things like that. And that's not going to help anybody. I think the genuine privacy concern is conversations that clients have with Gemini about their mental health are stored on Google's infrastructure. They could be used to improve the model. They're not subject to clinical confidentiality protections. And in Australia, specifically, this means they fall outside of Privacy Act provisions that govern things like clinical health records that are held by registered practitioners, right? And that's very important. This is also true of ChatGPT, Claude, and every other general purpose AI tool. So it's not just Gemini. And that's helpful for you to be aware of as well when you're talking to your clients about this. But the fact that Gemini is now actively trying to get ahead of the curve here and position itself in the mental health space makes it worth stating super clearly, okay? There is an ethical question for us as therapists, and it's not about, should we stop clients from using them or anything like that. They're adults and teens. They're going to use it. I think it's about whether or not, we are providing the education within our scope, right? Within our scope of expertise, within our roles of mental health and things like that, around safe use, okay? Around so they can make informed choices about whether they use it, whether they share it, what they can expect from different types of support and things like that. The other thing too, just before we finish up, is there's also professional boundary consideration that's, important. Gemini's crisis feature will sometimes direct people to call a hotline when what they actually need is a GP referral, right? Or they might need a psychiatrist, or they might need you, right? The triage logic that's been built into Google's AI users has no access at all to a person's history, to their diagnosis, doesn't know what medication they're on or not, their risk factors, things like that. It's only able to work from what the user puts in, okay? And, what the user puts in is going to be biased because, we don't always see our own stuff, right? And what this is going to mean is that sometimes the AI is going to miss things, number one, or number two, sometimes AI will over-respond and jump the gun and make things bigger than what they are or what they need to be. So, it's important because it means that we don't want to have clients arriving at our door already having, received direction from AI that isn't quite right for their situation. And we don't want to have to spend time untangling things, information, wrong information, inappropriate information, misguided information that they're getting from AI and they're believing it, right? So, if a client's disclosing anything sensitive at all to an AI tool, just let them know it's not protected. Maybe give them some guidance around how to share information if they're going to share it, or point them in the direction of something else. So it's not going to replace therapy. The concern that comes up a lot, and I really do understand why, is that this could happen. But I think the evidence is consistently showing that people who engage with AI for mental health support are actually more likely to go and seek our help, right? AI is lowering the barrier to people being able to come and get support when they need it. It's not replacing where they go, okay? And so I think AI creates opportunities for you to grow your private practice. Of course, if you want to be surfaced in any AI, there are ways to do that. It's going to be around how you're going with your digital footprint, and that's something that we can talk about in another episode. If you want more information on getting your practice surfaced in AI for clients, come over and join the AI Therapist Resource Hub. I'll pop the links in the show notes. Got to see a client. I hope this was helpful. Bye. And that's a wrap for this episode of the Private Practice Podcast. So as you reflect on today's insights, imagine creating real success in your private practice without going down rabbit holes or exhausting yourself with business activities that don't move the needle. With Practice Momentum, you have push of a button help available on demand. It's like having an expert in your pocket ready to guide you whenever you need it. Visit brooklynstorme.com to discover how Practice Momentum can transform your approach to building a thriving practice. I'm Dr. Brooklyn Storme, and I'll see you next time as we continue exploring the mind, business, and spirit of private practice success.